What if I told you the freedom you believe in isn't real? Not in the way you think. You vote, you speak, you post online, you protest, but all within lines someone else drew. Modern democracy, dressed in the language of liberty, is less a system of freedom and more a carefully managed illusion. And over 2,000 years ago, Plato saw it coming. To Plato, democracy wasn't the endpoint, it was a warning sign. In the Republic, he described democracy not as the pinnacle of civilization, but as a stage of decline, a phase where the people, consumed by freedom and driven by desire, reject order, reject wisdom, and welcome chaos, disguised as choice. Sound familiar? We celebrate elections like festivals, but who really wins? The candidate with the best policies, or the one with the sharpest slogan, the biggest war chest, the slickest image team? We no longer choose leaders based on character or reason. We choose them like we choose cereal, marketed, branded, and mass-produced for emotional appeal. This isn't democracy, it's a pageant. Plato warned that in such a system, truth becomes irrelevant. It's not the wise who rule, but the popular, not the good, but the loud. The mob's voice, swayed by charm and rhetoric, drowns out reason. And in that noise, demagogues rise, those who feed the people what they want to hear, all while tightening their grip on power. You see, modern democracy doesn't silence you with violence, it distracts you with entertainment, bread and circuses, news cycles packed with drama, social media debates that go nowhere, endless elections that promise change but recycle the same structures. You're not ruled by kings anymore, you're ruled by algorithms, influencers, and polished politicians who know how to smile while they lie. And still, we call it freedom. But Plato would say, it's soft tyranny, a system where you believe you're free because your cage has wallpaper, where the boundaries are invisible but enforced. Step too far outside, and the machine reminds you who's in charge. Not with clubs or chains, but with cancellation, censorship, and economic exile. So who really governs? Not the people. Not truly. The real power lies in the unseen, the media barons, the corporate donors, the think tanks, the bureaucratic deep state. Elections change faces, not systems. Presidents come and go, but the machinery stays, the polite dictatorship humming in the background. Plato's philosopher kings were a dream. What we have now are philosopher brands. Celebrities masquerading as statesmen, opinions sold like products, deep thoughts boiled down to sound bites, and the people, caught in this performance, mistake the play for real life. This is the danger of democracy without virtue. It becomes theater, a show for the masses, directed by the elite. And like all good illusions, it keeps you watching just long enough to never ask who's writing the script. Plato warned us, when freedom loses its anchor in truth, democracy becomes the perfect gateway to tyranny. And we're already standing at the gate. Democracy promises power to the people, but what happens when the people are manipulated? Plato feared not just democracy, but the kind of democracy that emerges when emotion replaces wisdom. He called it mob rule, a system where the loudest crowd sets the tone, and leaders become servants to passion rather than reason. In today's world, that crowd isn't in the streets. It's online, on screens, and in data. Modern democracy isn't led by mobs with torches, it's led by mobs with trending hashtags. The new rulers aren't philosophers or statesmen. They're PR firms, algorithm engineers, and marketing strategists. They don't need to shout. They just need to make you feel outrage, fear, belonging, division. They feed the mob, not truth, but narrative crafted carefully, delivered instantly. Plato's concern was never just who rules, it was how they rule. In a society ruled by appetite, the masses want pleasure, not principle. Leaders who rise in this environment don't need virtue. They need charisma, emotional intelligence, the ability to read the crowd and become what it craves. And once in power, they don't govern, they perform. This performance becomes the foundation of control. Manufactured consent. You believe you've chosen, but your choices were staged. The policies you cheer for, pre-approved. The outrage you feel, scripted. The enemy you hate, assigned. You are nudged, framed, and funneled into conclusions, then applauded for thinking them on your own. Elections become theater rituals of false agency. Yes, you vote. But between candidates pre-selected by donors and narratives shaped by media monopolies, are you truly choosing? Or are you simply endorsing a pre-written story? In this polite dictatorship, participation is not empowerment, it's validation for the system itself. And dissent? It's allowed, but only when it's harmless. Rage against a scandal, scream at a celebrity gaffe, protest symbolic issues and the system smiles. But question the core, the financial structure, the military-industrial web, the erosion of sovereignty, and suddenly, the free society doesn't seem so tolerant. Plato knew this. Real truth disrupts power, and power fears truth. So instead, you are taught comfort. You are taught that complexity is dangerous, that all must be simplified into slogans, that all political ideas can be packaged into tribes left or right, red or blue, until the only question that matters is, whose side are you on? And just like that, the mob becomes predictable, controllable. Democracy becomes a mechanism of pacification, not liberation. It gives you just enough choice to feel empowered, just enough outrage to feel involved, and just enough hope to keep believing, all while the real power consolidates further behind the curtain. Plato warned that when freedom becomes a mask, tyranny walks free. And yet we still call this progress. We tell ourselves this is the best it can be, that all systems are flawed, that democracy is the least bad, but that fatalism is part of the trap. Because when you believe no better system is possible, you stop striving for one. You accept the cage as home. Plato didn't hate democracy, mourned what it would become. A stage where the crowd cheers their own subjugation, where rulers rise not through wisdom, but through manipulation, where freedom is a performance and truth a casualty. What we have now isn't democracy. It's a simulation's lick, smooth and silently devouring what remains of real self-rule. Democracy doesn't die with a bang, it collapses into applause. It happens slowly, subtly, almost sweetly. The people ask for more freedom, then more safety, then more order. They cry out for someone to take control, and someone always does. That someone is the tyrant. And Plato warned us, democracy paves the path for his arrival. How does it begin? With too much freedom, too many voices, too many desires, too many appetites unchecked. Everyone wants everything, all at once. There's no center, just chaos disguised as choice. People grow tired. The noise becomes unbearable. And in that exhaustion, they welcome a savior, someone who promises peace, unity, and strength. Plato called it the transition from democracy to tyranny, the final fall. He wrote that the democratic man, overwhelmed by pleasure and personal freedom, loses discipline. He despises authority, mocks tradition, and demands instant gratification. In this mess, he becomes vulnerable. And then, the tyrant emerges not as a monster, but as a solution. The tyrant promises order, simplicity, a voice to cut through the noise. And at first it feels like relief. No more division, no more endless debate, just one clear direction. But that clarity comes at a cost. Freedom of thought becomes disloyalty. Dissent becomes danger. The people who once cried out for freedom now beg for obedience. You don't even realize it's tyranny because it comes wearing a smile. The modern tyrant doesn't stomp through the streets in boots. He appears on your feed, in your inbox, at your rallies. He's charismatic, confident, endlessly reassuring. He tells you that you matter, that you're part of something greater, and all he asks in return is everything. Plato warned, tyrants are born from democratic soil, because in a system that rewards image over virtue, desire over reason, we don't elevate the best, we elevate the bold, the ones who know how to manipulate the crowd, who say what we want to hear, and slowly make us forget how to think. And so democracy becomes its own executioner. By creating a culture of entitlement, it gives birth to resentment. People who feel unheard begin to crave a strong hand. And in time, that hand tightens into a fist. The same crowd that shouted for liberty now chants for loyalty. Plato saw it clearly. The tyrant exploits our fears, not our hopes. He doesn't need to build his empire overnight. He just waits for division to grow, for trust to fade, for the people to turn against each other. Then he steps in not as a villain, but as a unifier. And once in power, he never lets go. In modern times, tyranny looks different but feels the same. It's not a dictatorship of tanks, it's a dictatorship of thoughts, controlled speech, monitored opinions, sanitized history. You can still vote, still speak, but only within limits. You're free, as long as you obey. This is the destiny Plato feared, a democracy that devours itself. Not because it's evil, but because it forgets virtue, because it trades wisdom for pleasure, truth for comfort, freedom for control. And in the end, the people surrender willingly, even eagerly. All the tyrant had to do was promise them safety from themselves. What if the system was designed not to serve you but to survive you? That's the chilling truth behind modern democracy. It doesn't need to crush rebellion with tanks or violence. It simply absorbs it, sterilizes it, then sells it back to you as progress. Plato would have seen this for what it is, a regime that wears a friendly face, but guards its throne with iron discipline. Today's democratic machinery has mastered the art of self-preservation. It gives you the illusion of rebellion protests, debates, fiery speeches, but never lets anything truly disrupt the engine underneath. You rage online, but the algorithms redirect that energy. You march in the streets, but the policies remain unchanged. You vote and nothing real shifts. That's not freedom, that's feedback control. The trick? Let the people feel powerful while keeping them powerless. That's the genius of the polite dictatorship. You're allowed to speak as long as you say nothing threatening. You're allowed to vote as long as the choices come pre-filtered. You're allowed to dream as long as those dreams fit within the system's frame. And when you step out of line, you're not silenced, you're ignored. Plato warned that without a foundation of virtue, democracy turns inward. It starts to protect itself rather than the people it serves. Institutions become fortresses, bureaucrats become rulers, and truth becomes a managed asset. Science, law, education, these aren't neutral anymore. They're molded to support the status quo, cloaked in the language of reason, but driven by power. The media. It doesn't report reality, it manufactures it. You think you're informed, but you're being curated. Outrage is carefully rationed. Attention is redirected. Heroes and villains are selected in advance. And while you're distracted by scandals and surface-level drama, the real decisions are made quietly, behind closed doors, where cameras don't reach. Meanwhile, Technology becomes the new enforcer. Not through violence, but through surveillance, through data. Every click, every word, every search builds a profile. You're not imprisoned by walls, but by algorithms that predict and influence your behavior. It's the perfect control system, efficient, invisible, and self-justifying. So the system doesn't fear rebellion, it profits from it. Every protest becomes content. Every controversy boosts engagement. Every crisis becomes a reason to tighten the net. And you, the citizen, become a data point in a feedback loop designed to pacify while appearing responsive. This isn't democracy, it's digital feudalism with better PR. And if you question it, you're the problem. You're labeled extreme, dangerous, unhinged. The system pathologizes dissent, it doesn't debate it. Rational disagreement is no longer allowed to exist. Everything becomes identity warfare, tribal chaos. It's not about ideas anymore, it's about survival of the narrative. Plato's philosopher kings governed from wisdom. Today's rulers govern from brand strategy. They don't think, they focus group. They don't lead, they trend. They aren't statesmen, they're influencers in suits. And in a world run by perception, truth is just another opinion to manage. The system survives because it hides behind you. It says, you chose this, you voted for it. But what it never tells you is how your choices were shaped, how your instincts were gamed, how the world you see is a carefully filtered shadow of what truly exists. Plato tried to warn us. When the cave becomes comfortable, no one wants to see the light. What if everything you believe about freedom was just shadows on the wall? That was Plato's deepest warning. In his famous Allegory of the Cave, he described people chained in darkness, mistaking illusions for truth. The polite dictatorship of modern democracy is that cave bright, loud, comfortable, but still a prison. The real tyranny isn't brute force seats, mental sedation. You're not beaten into obedience. You're entertained into apathy, distracted by headlines, numbed by culture, and comforted by consumerism. You think you're free because your chains are invisible. You vote, shop, scroll, and sleep, never realizing that the system isn't just around you, it's inside you. Plato believed true freedom begins with awakening. Not through elections, not through protests, but through self-knowledge, through philosophy, through turning away from the spectacle and asking the hardest question of all: what is real? In a society built on illusion, truth becomes a revolutionary act. But awakening hurts. Because to step out of the cave, you must first admit that you've been deceived, that what you believed was freedom was control, that what you trusted as leadership was manipulation, that what you defended as truth was narrative. That takes courage. Most people don't want truth, they want comfort. This is why Plato argued only the philosopher, the seeker of truth, should lead. Not the richest, not the most popular, not the loudest, but the wisest. Those who've escaped the cave, seen the light, and return not to rule over others with force, but to guide with reason. To teach, to awaken, that was his real solution. But where are the philosophers now? They're not in power. They're not trending. They're not selling books with shiny titles. The world doesn't reward wisdom, it rewards spectacle. In this polite dictatorship, the philosopher is silenced, ignored, or mocked, because he doesn't entertain or disturbs. Yet that's exactly what we need: to be disturbed, to be shaken out of the illusion, to stop mistaking representation for reality, to question every system, every narrative, every truth we've been fed. Because until we do, we remain in the cave arguing over shadows while the real masters pull the strings behind us. Plato's message wasn't one of despair, it was a call to transformation. He didn't say democracy was doomed. He said it was fragile. That without virtue, education, and philosophy, it would collapse into tyranny. But with awakening, with the pursuit of higher truth, we could build something greater, something real, not a polite dictatorship, but a just society. That journey starts with one step, turning away from the shadows. Stop accepting comfort over truth. Stop mistaking noise for meaning. Stop defending a system that smiles while it controls you. Because once you see the cave for what it is, you can never unsee it. And from there, real freedom begins, not given to you, but claimed by you. The polite dictatorship only survives as long as you believe it's democracy. Plato knew this. He wrote it for us. The question now is, will we listen, or will we keep clapping for the illusion while the chains grow tighter?